Welcome back to Daily Dose of Knowledge. If you're new here, subscribe and stick around. Because today's video is about a type of person that will make you say, I know exactly who this is. This is the person who believes their opinion is not just an opinion. It is the truth, the only truth. This is the person who dismisses your pain but expects the world to stop when they are hurting. Who believes a problem only truly matters if it happened to them. This is the person who looks at everyone around them and sees either followers or obstacles. People who agree are wise. People who disagree are simply wrong. You have met this person. You may have grown up with one. You may work with one. Today we break down the full psychology behind this behavior. Why they think this way, what is driving it beneath the surface, and how it affects everyone around them. Let's start with the core concept. What is egocentric bias and where does it come from? Egocentric bias is the well-documented psychological tendency to rely too heavily on your own perspective when interpreting the world. To treat your personal experience as the default, the norm, the standard against which everything else is measured. Every human being has some degree of egocentric bias. It is built into how the brain processes reality. You experience the world from one fixed point, your own consciousness, and that creates an unavoidable gravitational pull toward your own perspective. Psychologist Jean Piaget first documented this in children. Not because they are selfish, but because they genuinely cannot yet conceptualize that other people have perspectives different from their own. Most people grow out of this as they develop. They learn that other people have inner worlds as rich and valid as their own. They develop what psychologists call theory of mind, the ability to understand that others think, feel, and perceive differently. But some people never fully complete this development. And in adults, the result is exactly the person you are thinking of right now. Because egocentric bias in its extreme form is not just self-centeredness, it is a complete distortion of reality. This is the tendency to overestimate how many people share your opinions, values, and behaviors. The egocentric person doesn't just think their view is correct. They genuinely believe most reasonable people agree with them. Anyone who disagrees is therefore unreasonable, uninformed, or morally deficient. They are not exchanging perspectives. They are correcting errors. Because in their mind, there is no legitimate alternative view. There is only their view and ignorance. The second behavior is the uniqueness of their suffering. Their pain is always more real, more intense, and more deserving of attention than anyone else's. When you share a problem, they redirect to their own. When you express pain, they minimize it or immediately one-up it. Not always out of malice, but because their brain genuinely registers their own experience as more vivid and therefore more significant than yours. Psychologists call this the empathy gap. The difficulty in appreciating emotional states different from your own current state. Their feelings are always in focus. Yours are always blurry. The third behavior is moral self-licensing. They see themselves as fundamentally good. And because they are good, their actions are by definition justified. When they hurt someone, it was necessary. When they are unfair, it was deserved. When they force their beliefs onto others, it is for those people's own good. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of this psychology. Because a person who is certain of their own goodness has no internal mechanism for self-correction. They cannot genuinely apologize. They cannot truly change. Because they never believed they were wrong in the first place. Now let's go deeper. Why does this psychology develop? What creates a person like this? Research in developmental psychology consistently points to two primary pathways. The first pathway is excessive validation in childhood. A child who is constantly told they were exceptional, always right, and uniquely special, without being taught to consider others' perspectives, can develop a deeply entrenched egocentric worldview. Their brain literally wired itself around the assumption that their perspective is the central one. That the world organizes itself around their experience. And when reality eventually fails to confirm this, as it always does, the result is either a crisis of identity or an intensification of the egocentric defense. The second pathway is the opposite. Chronic invalidation, a child whose perspective was consistently dismissed, overridden, or ignored, can develop a compensatory egocentrism. If nobody ever validated my reality, I will make my reality undeniable. I will make it the only reality. In both cases, the underlying driver is the same: a fragile, threatened sense of self that requires the world to conform to their perspective in order to feel safe. This is the crucial insight. Extreme egocentric behavior is not confidence. It is not superiority. It is a defense mechanism. The aggressive insistence that their reality is the only reality is protection against the terror of feeling unseen, insignificant, or wrong. Now let's talk about what this does to the people around them, because the impact is significant and often deeply damaging. The first effect is reality distortion. When you spend significant time around a strongly egocentric person, their version of reality begins to seep into yours. Their constant insistence that their perspective is objective truth creates subtle pressure to doubt your own perception. Psychologists call this gaslighting when it is deliberate, but egocentric people often do it entirely unconsciously. They are not trying to manipulate you. They genuinely believe what they are saying. And that sincerity makes it more convincing and more dangerous. Relationships with strongly egocentric people are profoundly draining because they are fundamentally one-directional. Your needs, your perspective, your pain, these are always secondary. Always. And over time, the chronic experience of being unseen erodes your own sense of worth. The third effect is the suppression of your authentic voice. When someone consistently responds to your perspective with dismissal, correction, or redirection, you learn to stop sharing it. You self-censor. You shrink. You begin to filter your own reality through their lens just to avoid the conflict. This is perhaps the most insidious damage. Because it doesn't feel like damage, it feels like keeping the peace. The fourth effect is on group dynamics. In families, workplaces, and communities, a strongly egocentric person at the center warps the entire social structure around themselves. Decisions get made based on their reality. Problems only get addressed when they affect them. Other people's legitimate needs get systematically deprioritized. And because the egocentric person is often charismatic, certain, and loud, they frequently end up in positions of influence, which amplifies the damage exponentially. So how do you actually deal with a person like this in your life? Evidence does not work here. Because the problem is not informational, it is psychological. You cannot debate someone out of a defense mechanism they don't know they have. The second thing is to maintain your own reality firmly and quietly. You do not need their validation for your experience to be real. Your pain does not become less valid because they minimize it. Your perspective does not become wrong because they dismiss it. Hold your ground internally, even when you don't argue externally. The third thing is to set boundaries around belief imposition. You are not obligated to adopt their worldview. You are not required to agree. A calm, consistent, I see it differently repeated without escalation is one of the most powerful tools you have. The fourth thing is to manage your exposure honestly. Some egocentric people in your life cannot be removed. Family members, colleagues, long-term relationships. But you can be deliberate about how much of your inner world you share with them, and how much weight you give their version of reality. And finally, if this person is someone you genuinely care about and want to help, understand that the only thing that can actually shift deeply egocentric behavior is consistent experience of safe, non-threatening perspective taking. Not confrontation, not argument. Gradual, patient exposure to the reality that other people's inner worlds are real and valid. That shift cannot be forced. It can only be invited. And it requires more patience than most people can sustain. The person who believes their reality is the only reality is not simply arrogant. They are trapped. Trapped in a perspective so total and so defended that the possibility of other valid realities genuinely does not compute. Understanding that doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means responding with clarity instead of confusion. Knowing what you are dealing with is always the first step to dealing with it well. That is your daily dose of knowledge for today. If this video describes someone in your life, drop a comment and tell me how you handle them. Share this with someone who needs to understand what they are dealing with. Subscribe for more videos that go where most people are afraid to look. I'll see you in the next one.